We are living life in the fast lane. On today's show, it's full throttle fifth gear content as we get to know one of Britain's brightest young female racing drivers. But the rip-roaring action doesn't stop there. We have news on funding lifelines, a rematch full of fury, and we can promise this will be a twerk-free zone. Welcome to SportSpiel. Hello listeners, welcome to episode 32, brought to you as usual from King's Place here in London. I'm here as ever on hosting duty, as is a certain Will Moulton. How is everything?
Everything was good until you made those puns.
How dare you? I put a lot of work into those. Anyway, it's been 3 weeks since we last met up. How has life been in that time?
As ever, life has been incredibly manic. Very busy at work, very busy recording a very, very special interview for SportSpiel, which some of you may have seen me tweet about earlier this week. Cannot wait to share that. I know Alasdair has done a couple of pretty tasty interviews as well, with a lot of good content coming up. It's getting close to Christmas. Everyone's starting to feel a bit festive. Our men are playing hockey in India and they're doing okay. So even though I'm busy, I'm good. How about yourself?
Yeah, likewise. Lots of interviews. We have got already wrapped up in the pipeline that will release to people in due course. Like you said, Christmas is coming up, which also means New Year is coming up. We, likewise, as a podcast, have some big plans for 2019, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit of reflection in the near future about what we've actually done in 2018 as well. The first full year we've operated
Indeed
as a podcast. But anyway, on to today's show, which is arguably packed with more stuff than usual. First up, we have our latest feature interview with Scottish racing driver Emily Glanvill. In part 2, we will have our news roundup, where we pick out some of the most important stories from the last couple of weeks. That is followed by our discussion section, where we look back on a defining week in women's football. All of that is to come, but first, it is time to launch into part 1, our feature interview. Emily Glanvill is one of the most talented up-and-coming racing drivers in this country, and at 19 is showing huge potential. In 2016, she won the Teenage Cancer Trust Scholarship. In 2017, she was selected for the Scottish Motorsports Academy, but we explore her journey in what we can all agree, I think, is a male-dominated sport. She takes us through from the very beginning, through the challenges of being a driver, the funding, the marketing, and the occasional sexism, and she also takes us through her life away from the racetrack. Of course, the announcement as well of the women-only W Series was a point of conversation, but in our chat we also looked at whether we're focusing on the right thing. We keep looking at gender, but maybe we should be looking at funding instead. Welcome back, listeners, to our feature interview section of the show, where we find out all about another hugely talented athlete. This time around, we're delighted to be joined by a racing driver, an engineering scholar, and a sports engineering student. She may only be just 19, but her name keeps cropping up as one to watch in the motor racing world. It is a very warm welcome to Emily Glanvill. Thank you for coming onto the show, Emily. How is everything?
Hi there. Well, thank you for having me on, firstly. Yeah, everything's going well. You know, it's been a busy year, and we're just into the winter now, but things are still moving quickly. Loads of work on sponsorship, social media, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very much all go.
Exactly. I'm sure we'll find out later on just how much is on the go at the moment. But I suppose we better start at the beginning, because we obviously like to find out or follow athletes' pathways, if you like, through their respective sports. So where did that first taste of motorsport come from for you? Because I understand when you were younger, it was very much about swimming in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I used to be really into swimming when I was younger. That was kind of my main sport. My family, they weren't into motorsport at all, really. It was actually my best friend, her dad, was really into the speedway when he was younger. And one day he saw that it was still on in Edinburgh. So he took us both along. We must have been about 11 or so at the time, 11 or 12. Kind of got dragged along to this speedway racing on a Friday night. You know, totally were not up for it. Oh, it's going to be awful, such a boys thing. But we got there and we just enjoyed it so much, had the time of our lives. So then from then on, we just went back every Friday night. And before you know it, we started like volunteering at the track. And then one day the riders were going go-karting, and they had a sort of like fans versus riders night at the go-karting track. So we went along, and we were very slow, but it was almost a little bit annoying how slow we were. So we kept going back and back, and we got quicker and quicker. And yeah, my love for it just sort of took off, really. And as soon as I was kind of into the go-karting, I just knew I wanted to race cars, and ever since that's just been the dream.
Yeah. Well, my next question, if you like, is what got you hooked in the first place? But since you touched on the speed aspect and starting off slow, is it you trying desperately to speed up each step? Is that what kind of hooked you in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's always been the challenge. Like, it wasn't something that I just got in the car and was immediately quick. I'd be lying if I said that was true. It just wasn't the case. In many ways, I was really pretty bad. But that really annoyed me, and I wanted to be good. I really wanted to work at this until I was good at it. And motorsport at the time, like, none of my friends at school were into that at all. It was so different and so unique. But I really, really liked that. I've always liked to do things that are kind of slightly different, or like stand out from the crowd slightly. So at that age, it was more for me, it was usually like fashion. So I was really into fashion, but quite like, different fashion. Like, I used to make my own clothes and things like that. But then here was this other thing that I could do that was like a little bit different and unique and unorthodox, if you like, for like a 12-year-old girl to be into that. And that just really appealed.
Yeah. I suppose the word alternative, if you like, is something that crops up. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, after that, you continued swimming and racing for 2 years, I believe. What were the considerations you had to take in when it came to that point where you had to decide which one to focus on properly?
Sure, yeah. So I was swimming competitively and racing less so for the first couple of years, as you say, just whilst I was getting into it. At that point, I was kind of go-karting at my local racetracks. I would maybe go along to their like junior like club races, if you like. So it was like, just kind of hire carts. Never owned my own cart or anything like that. So it was still something you could do like once a month, and that would be you. Whereas I was swimming multiple times a week, training with a club. The specific like type of swimming I did was called like life-saving sport. So myself and I had like a teammate, if you like, a partner. We'd compete together. We were both training with the Scotland squad. I was competing like in the UK. I think I placed about 4th that year. So it was kind of the peak of my swimming career, if you like, at that time. And then I kind of moved out of go-karts into cars. And it was like a very budget level racing discipline called autograss. So it's kind of like a muddy oval racetrack, and was absolutely loving it. And then I entered a scholarship to move into circuit racing, and for me, like, circuit racing was always the dream. So we trained very hard, like, on the run up to the scholarship. But to be entirely honest with you, we were going along for the enjoyment of taking part in this scholarship event. The scholarship tryout involved driving the car, a fitness test, a media interview, that sort of thing. And I was just so excited to be taking part in this event where I'd get to drive the car, even just for a few minutes. So it was so unexpected. And obviously, I was absolutely delighted when I actually was chosen as the winner of the scholarship. So in February 2016, I was awarded the scholarship for a fully funded year in circuit racing. And within 1 month, I started circuit racing. So, from going in February to just kind of plodding around a muddy field in a Toyota Yaris to racing a Citroen Saxo all over the UK with a massive, following, fans, all this sort of thing, overnight basically, was insane. But it made me realise that whilst I was juggling the swimming, school, I was sitting my hires, like my most important school exams that year as well. I couldn't do it all. And that's when I pulled back from swimming, and it became more of just a hobby, and the racing really took over.
Mm-hmm. And that scholarship in particular, the Teenage Cancer Trust scholarship we're talking about. And you said that you didn't expect to get it.
in the first place. So that massive switch overnight from your Toyota Yaris racing to circuit racing, how easy is that for you to adjust to?
It was a real challenge, to be honest. Like, as I say, like the reason I kind of was into motorsport in the first place was because it was a challenge. But this brought about something, completely different. It wasn't even motorsport as I knew it. Not only was it circuit racing, so like how the car handled, the car was obviously much quicker. All these sorts of things were obviously completely different. Also, the type of racing and the rules and the regulations and the flags. I had to set a racing license. I had to get all this important safety equipment, but also just the way that people conducted themselves in this environment was completely different. Going and racing autographs was just something you would turn up in a field in the rain with a hammer and some cable ties in your car, and that was you. As I say, my family weren't into motorsport, but we managed to muddle by because you didn't really need any mechanical knowledge or anything. You were just there to have fun. And then suddenly moving into this championship where, there was trophies up for grabs, there was podium presentations, there was interviews, media people there was fans that came to the racetrack to see you, people like following you on social media, reaching out to you all the time. It's so exciting. But overnight, as you say, such a big change and such a lot to get your head around.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can imagine for a lot of people that would be an incredibly daunting prospect. It's something to have all of that media attention and then all the technical side parts as well, all thrust on you at pretty much the same time. I mean, I'm nicking a quote that you said, I think from a previous interview that you did, where that was sort of the moment that turned your life around. So I kind of want to touch on that more. What was it about that moment that turned your life around? Where was it before?
Sure. Well, for me, as I mentioned, like when I properly got into karting and was like, yeah, this is something I want to do. For me, the general route that most people go in motorsport is they do karting and they buy their own car and they properly race go-karts and then they move into cars. But I never wanted to follow that path. As soon as I was doing like rental go-karting, I wanted to move into cars. And it was circuit racing that I always wanted to do. But with no kind of family background in the sport, and motorsport is such an expensive sport. There just wasn't the money there to jump into that. And even if we had the money, we wouldn't have even known where to start. How do you go about that when you don't have any contacts or anything like that? For me, it was always like the dream, but would it ever happen? And to suddenly go from this dream to suddenly being a reality was obviously like mind-blowing, so yeah, it was a massive turnaround moment because I realized like this dream was actually going to come true and this was going to be my stepping stone into circuit racing. And once I was there, yes, I mean, I need to get the budget together and everything to stay in it, but this was my window of opportunity and my step ladder, if you like, into the sport.
An alternative route again.
Yeah,
if you want another alternative twist.
Yeah.
One of the big things I noticed, and you mentioned there that your parents had no background in motorsport and you didn't know really where to begin. And if you had the money, you would know where to begin. One of the big things is that I noticed is how much you had to learn and how quickly, but also with regards to the sponsorship and the money aspect, because that's arguably the most important thing, if you like, other than the talent, obviously. But then, how important is that money and sponsorship to actually getting on the track?
Yeah. Oh, it's massive. And to be entirely honest, like that's in all my time in motorsport, the biggest challenge I've ever faced in life. In fact, is getting the sponsorship to do what I love. The last 2 years since the scholarship ended, at the end of the 2016 season, I had to self-fund, get the money myself to continue racing, and it's just been so difficult. I definitely do so much more like sponsorship, marketing, like business kind of work than I do actually driving a race car. But it is something I enjoy, and I feel like I've fallen in love with that as much as I have racing. And I always say to people, like, racing kind of came along in my life at the right time, because I was a very shy, like, introverted kid, like wouldn't speak out in class, would never be able to do presentations at school and that sort of thing. And getting into motorsport and winning that scholarship and doing all these media interviews, but talking about something I was passionate about built my confidence so much. And now I can do it quite happily. And that's impacted on my university degree, getting a job, all other aspects of my life. Like, that's had such a massive effect on it.
Was that arguably the making of you then?
Oh, 100%. I would always say that. Like, the life lessons that I have learned from being involved in the sport are, they've made such a huge difference to my life.
I mean, you mentioned that the marketing side thing as well, and I suppose you're as much an expert in marketing now as you are at driving as well. Was it, from a sponsorship side of things, is it tough to get people on board in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. It is very difficult because it is a very alternative method of advertising. I personally think it's very useful, very effective way of marketing because there's so many exciting things you can do. But I think a lot of people from the outside looking in, like, they think maybe you're just going to pop a sticker on a car and that's going to be the end. And maybe that's how some partnerships do work. But for me, there's so much more you can do, having people up to the track to watch it, see behind the scenes, sit in the race car. I've done like hot lap experiences with sponsors before where they get in the passenger seat and I take them around the track, displaying your car outside their workspace or, location. There's so many kind of exciting ways that you can really generate interest and generate a good partnership.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, there's more to it than just the sticker.
Yeah, definitely. But sometimes, like, talking to somebody for long enough to get them interested that you can tell them all of that is the difficult part, or reaching that person in the first place. So I spend like a lot of time phoning businesses or walking into local businesses with a sponsorship proposal that I've made, and speaking to people. But it can be very hard to get to the person that makes these decisions. When you walk in as a 16, 17-year-old girl into an office and say, "Can I speak to the managing director?" Well, no, So it's hard to get past those hurdles, I think.
Moving on and kind of sticking with the theme of learning, if you like, and we'll move on to the Scottish Motorsports Academy, which you were selected for in 2017, I think I'm right in saying, which is an initiative designed to help young Scottish drivers. What types of things are they looking to develop with you on that initiative? Is it about that marketing side again, or is it a lot of talent-based stuff as well?
So probably an equal split of both, actually. It was a really good course, so it was kind of 4 lecture-based tutorials, if you like. So the first one we spoke about like the friction circle and very technical aspects of racing, which was really interesting as well from like an engineering point of view, as well as obviously being able to apply it to my own driving. So that was fantastic. And then we also spoke about kind of career development planning and having a 5-year plan, where you want to go, what championships would benefit you the most, weighing up like kind of matrices of all the different aspects of being a racing driver and where you're sitting at the moment and how you could improve each of these, setting yourself targets, that sort of thing. But equally, we chatted a lot about sponsorship. We had a guest speaker in actually who helped us with particularly Facebook marketing, which again I found really interesting. He was talking about the usefulness of vlogging, which was really, really interesting. It's obviously become a massive thing at the moment. And he was like an expert in Facebook marketing, so he gave us some really good tips. But we also spoke about fitness, nutrition, and things like that as well. So really, it was an all-round like package of giving us help and advice and support, if you like, about all the different aspects it takes to be a successful racing driver and how that we can improve ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, you list all of that, and then you think about the scholarship as well, and all of that has taken place in a really condensed amount of time when you think about it. What would you say is the most important thing you've learned in that 2-year time span?
I think I can be quite hard on myself in life in general, but I think the most important thing that I still need to work on, and that I still work on like every day, is mindset, because I think that has such a big impact on your performance, both on and off the track. But yeah, just going into a race, having the right mindset and knowing that I can do it, and knowing that I can perform equally as well as other drivers, either male, female, older, younger, it doesn't matter. And just going in with that confidence in myself. But also, in the way I approach sponsorship, like the determination, like not giving up, and you get, there's a lot of setbacks. You get told no a lot of times. So having that mindset to just pick yourself back up and keep on going is definitely, I think that's very important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a journalist, I get told no a lot of the time, so I can definitely sympathise with that.
You can associate.
Interesting, the mindset thing as well, and because I'm thinking back to when you said that you were sort of a naturally shy person before racing came along. Is that where that mindset comes from, that you're kind of naturally like putting yourself down when you shouldn't really?
I think it probably is. Maybe that's a female thing as well. I don't know, maybe that's controversial, but I think like I went to an all-girls school, and it was very kind of, everybody worried a lot about what they looked like and what other girls thought of them, and was this girl speaking behind their back, all this sort of like young girls growing up, like it's totally natural, like everyone was the same. But I think that really affected me a lot, and I actually went through quite a tough time, like around the end of primary 6, something I've actually never spoken about in interviews and things before. But my school actually closed down very, very suddenly, and my mum, she was a teacher at that school as well. So all of a sudden, in the space of 2 weeks, I went from being incredibly happy, loved school, desperate to be the head girl, like school was my passion, if you like. And then, yeah, as I say, within 2 weeks, the school shut down, and we had nowhere to go for the next year. All the other schools in the area had already, taken in however many pupils and were maxed out. And it was just a very stressful time, with obviously my mum losing her job and things as well. And that really changed my whole opinion of school, I think. And I was just never really quite settled again at school after that. So in the school that I moved to, I just wasn't very happy, which was a shame. But it was probably just due to those kind of circumstances. So yeah, having motorsport to build my confidence and kind of build me back up after that was kind of like the lifeline that I needed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say, yeah, that 2 week period, if you like, I suppose, did that affect you a lot more than you thought it would at the start, where you're still looking around for something to replicate those happy days, and you don't really find it until motorsport comes along?
Yeah, I think that was bang on. Like it couldn't have come at a better time. Like I can't think what age you'd be in primary 6, but it must have been like 10 or so. Like it's a really important time in your life, and it was that, I always think that was that first sort of time in my life where I was like really upset and disappointed. Like you're so sheltered as a child from like bad things happening, and then it all kind of came at once, if you like. And it was just such a sudden change. That's something at that age I'd never ever experienced before. So yeah, like it definitely forced me to kind of grow up, and it's a bit of an eye-opening one. Like this is kind of real life.
Yeah. Do you still use that moment as something to think back on when times go tough, be on the track, and you can draw something from that?
Yeah, definitely. I still do think about it a lot, actually. It's strange. I still keep in touch with quite a few of the people from that old school. Like some of them, I'm not seeing them. It's primary school. Like it's ages ago. I think a lot of my like current friends probably don't even remember primary school. It's strange, but yeah, no, it was a massive part of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's weird what memories the brain retains, if you like, that you can pick up from later on in life. I'll move on now to the idea of perception, if you like, because something, again, you said in the past is that when people ask me what I do, they look shocked when I say I'm a racing driver. Is that primarily down to the fact that you're a woman?
I think so, probably. I always say, other than motorsport, when people ask me what my hobbies and interests are, always been really into fashion, makeup, things that are stereotypically girly. So I think, when I'm all dressed up and out and about, and then I'm chatting to somebody I've never met before, they probably get an impression of me just based on like my appearance of what I'm wearing, and they think, that's so stereotypically girly. How could you be into race cars, which is so stereotypically masculine? But to me, that's just the sort of contrast that I really love. So it's never been an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you respond to that when people look at you shocked, like, oh my god, she races cars?
Yeah, I always just laugh and say, what does a racing driver look like?
It's a valid question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you said at the start as well, sort of thinking of motorsport as this boys thing, and people often refer to motorsport as this man's world or male-dominated arena. I don't know if that's true or not based on your own experiences.
Yeah, it's definitely a male-dominated sport, that's for sure. Less than like 5% of license holders in the UK are female. I've been involved in like a number of campaigns promoting women in sport, and that sort of thing. To me, it's never actually bothered me. I mean, yeah, as I said earlier, like, because I didn't grow up in motorsport, and before I knew anything about the sport, myself and my best friend, when we went along, we were, convinced it was going to be a boys thing. But as soon as we were there, it never even crossed my mind, to be honest. Once you get into something, you just love it for what it is. You're not kind of thinking, do I belong here? Like, as long as you're welcomed, like, you just kind of get on with it, really. So
exactly. And did you feel welcomed by and large?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I wonder then, because you didn't have that background, if you like, family-wise, did you maybe have to earn the respect of people through your driving a little bit?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's been a few times where like I've maybe experienced a little bit of sexism myself in the sport. I can't say it's ever massively bothered me, because I kind of try to always turn it around and use it as like extra motivation, rather than letting it like act as like a setback or deter me in any way. But the story that I always tell, because for some reason I always remember this one, but myself and that friend of mine, we went to a karting track we'd never been to before, and we were getting out the car, and we got all our helmets and kit. We had our own like helmets and suits and stuff by that point, and we were just getting them out the boot of the car, and this car full of boys pulled up next to us, and they got out and they were laughing and like giggling and pointing and whispering, saying like, basically, girls with the karting stuff, like, haha, like, they're going to be awful just because they're girls. And then we walked into the karting centre, and turned out we were actually racing against them. So it was literally just this group of boys, and then myself and Ellen. And so, we could have got angry about it, confronted them about it, said something, but we decided, oh, no, let's just keep it quiet. Let's just go out on the track, drive a race, and then see how we get on, and maybe that will prove more of a point than, if we make a big scene about it. So out onto the track we went, and it was like maybe a half-hour endurance race, and I won the event by about 3 laps, and just drove circles around them, and they came off, and they're dead white in the face, didn't say a word, totally embarrassed, they hid away. That was it. And you were like, well, there you go. Like, if you just kind of change it around in your head, like, and as you say, like, if you just use it to sort of prove a point, if you like, once you've gone out there and just got on with the job and raced hard and done well, then you can't argue with that.
Exactly.
The results.
Yeah. That's the best response that you can come up with, essentially, in that situation, isn't it? Do you almost feel then that there's almost a sense of responsibility on your shoulders for any other women or girl who might want to get into motorsport?
Yeah, there can be actually sometimes a lot of pressure to prove a point for women, and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of it isn't always about your results. It's about how you conduct yourself in the paddock and at race meetings in general. You know, if you just get stuck in and you show that you love it and you're passionate about it and that's why you race, then does it really matter? You know, if you win or if you're in the mid pack, because you know there's boys that are also in the mid pack or are winning, or you know, people place at different places. That doesn't matter. If you're doing something that you love, that should be enough. So as long, I think, as you go along to the racetrack, you get involved like everyone else, and you're obviously there for the right reasons, then you know.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point, because I think too often people just look at the results or your time stamps, if you like, rather than your work ethic.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could work, you know, 10 times as hard as a person who wins the race and come 10th, and you could be delighted with that. You know, that if you're racing for yourself rather than, you know, constantly comparing yourself to everyone else, then that should be enough.
And sometimes when I ask these questions about, you know, the female side of sport, because I ask those questions for, be it boxing, whatever, is your stereotypical male-dominated sports, if you like, and I always get a little bit frustrated because the lack of women in that sport, any sport, it makes it a topical question.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be a topical question, is always my thing. It should always be people focusing on your ability, your talent, your work ethic, rather than your gender all the time. So is there a way to change that perception, do you think? Or is it just continuing to do what you do?
Yeah, like I totally agree, and it's actually something I've been speaking a bit more about recently. So I often, it's probably like one of the most common topics that I get asked about.
Yeah, I imagine you've had this conversation so many times over.
Yeah, but I don't mind talking about it at all. Like, you know, I'm totally comfortable talking about it. But I was speaking with Sports Scotland in one of their articles, literally just a few weeks ago, and it was just after the announcement of this new W series, which, if you've not heard of it, is basically a championship that's going to be only for women. So no men will be allowed to race in this championship, only women. And the idea is that it's going to feed women into F1, and hopefully we'll see a woman doing well in F1 in the future. But there's a lot of controversy like about it, saying, you know, it's segregating women and that sort of thing. And I personally don't really agree with it, I don't think. But that's an aside. But I was saying, like, during this interview, that, as you say, like, talking about women in motorsport is what's making women in motorsport a thing, a topic that should be discussed. You know, if we just didn't talk about it at all, then it wouldn't be weird or taboo. It would just be like normal, because we don't talk about men in motorsport, do we? Just talk about people in motorsport. It shouldn't be this thing that we feel the need to discuss. And that's very hypocritical to say, because I do a lot, as I say, of talking about women in motorsport. But it kind of hit me recently that perhaps this is the approach that we should be taking, rather than doing all these big campaigns, you know, encouraging more women into motorsport and all these sorts of things. We should actually just be completely ignoring it and getting on with it. Maybe that's the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the W series there, and it's something, I think it was episode 29 of our podcast, where we had a good 10-15 minute discussion on that, because it was the week that news broke. And I'll confess that I wasn't a fan of it, because I'm generally against that sort of positive discrimination in all forms, if you like. And we kind of came to the conclusion that it might not actually last that long.
Yeah.
Don't know if that's something you go along with.
Yeah, given that when the announcement came out, the shock of social media and everything went mad. Like, it was crazy. And I didn't read like one positive review on it. Everyone was very negative. So I think that, you know, if they do actually get it off the ground and running, as you say, it will be interesting to see how it goes and how it stands, given the kind of perception and like reception that it's got in the media and the press.
From your point of view, so a racer's point of view, and you're looking for, I presume, your ultimate end goal, having that W Series there, do you even think about that as an end goal, or has it changed in any way, shape or form?
Yeah, not at all. It doesn't appeal to me, to be honest. The one thing I like it to me that's appealing about the championship is that they were saying like you wouldn't have to pay to take part in it. But that's only appealing to me because of my massive financial struggle with sponsorship, etc.
Yeah, that's not a gender
as a
thing,
theory, yeah. Like, you know, any race car that's free, I would jump at it. Like it's unrelated, but no, the general championship, the car, the fact that you're only racing against women, it just doesn't appeal at all. There's actually a class in autograss when I was just racing in autograss, called Ladies Class 1, and it was the exact same as men's Class 1. You raced the exact same car, but in men's Class 1 you could have men or women, but it was mainly men, and then in Ladies Class 1 you could only have women. And they actually did that for the right reasons. To be fair, the idea was you could have a car, you could share it with a husband and wife, and it kept the cost down. So you'd actually race the exact same car. The man would race it in men's Class 1, and then the woman would go out later in the day in ladies' Class 1. Great idea for a budget sport. Totally saw the sense in it. But when I got my adults, moved up, I was 16 and started racing in the adults class instead of the juniors, I chose to race in men's Class 1 because for me, racing in ladies Class 1 just wasn't something that would ever cross my mind. Like, I'd much rather just race against everyone because, you know, I would want to be the best, not the best girl. Like, to compete equally if you can, then you totally should. You want to be the best of a small bunch. You want to be the best of everyone. So, yeah, to me, not appealing, and it doesn't really affect the way I want to go with my career at all.
Mm-hmm. And one last big question, if you like. Are we maybe tackling the wrong issue in that we keep looking at gender when perhaps we should be looking at finance?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, insightful comment to make, actually. And it's something that a lot of people that maybe aren't so involved in motorsport probably don't usually pick up on. So it's nice to hear you mention that. But yeah, definitely. There's not a single person in motorsport, and I don't think that doesn't struggle with finance. It's just an incredibly expensive sport, and I don't know if you actually saw, there's a amazing documentary that came out just last week on Billy Munger, very famous driver, famous now, as he lost his legs at Darlington Park, and I've seen some things on Facebook and Twitter over the last couple of days saying that he is really struggling for sponsorship and can't find the money to continue his racing career. And you just think, if somebody as inspirational and as talented and with the coverage and exposure as he does can't get sponsorship, then that just shows that everyone must be really struggling. It's not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I looked back, I think, several months ago where I did a story at work about a racing driver. It was James Winslow, I think his name was. Yeah. If that name rings any bells, and he was in hospital because he couldn't afford medical insurance. Gosh. And then that was one of the things that struck out for me, that you're racing at these hundreds of miles an hour, yet you don't have medical insurance because you can't afford it. And then that really hammers home the finance point, doesn't it?
Yep, that's it. Yeah, you kind of start to take risks that you maybe shouldn't, just because you're so desperate to get out on track, and you kind of do it at any cost.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on then to the immediate future, what's next in the pipeline, if you like, from a racing perspective?
Sure. So, well, over the winter, I've actually been working with my uni a bit. So we've got like a Strathclyde karting society, if you like, here at uni, and I'm very happy to be vice president of that for this year. So I've been working to kind of expand the club a bit out of karting and into cars. So I've been running some like auto testing events. So that's been really fun. So we're actually there just on Saturday, just past. So over the winter, I'm going to be doing quite a lot, organising those sorts of things for them. I'm also doing a lot of sponsorship things for myself. So I've been talking to a lot of companies and that, just trying to build connections. And I've also been doing a lot of radio interviews, networking events, podcasts like this, for example, just to really try to increase my outreach and just, find any contacts that are out there that might be interested in getting involved. And then looking ahead to kind of next year, I'm just sort of researching all the options available at the moment. So we still actually haven't confirmed exactly which championship I'll race in next season, mainly because I need to know what budget I'm looking at first. If I could get a larger budget, then there's different championships that I'd like to compete in. If it was a smaller budget, then I've got a few options for those as well. And it very much depends on what company I was looking at working with and what would best suit their interests.
Long term, we touched on long-term goals before, but what is your sort of long-term goal? Because I know you've mentioned the British Touring Car Championship in the past as well. Is that still very much there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always kind of said saloon cars, rather than single seaters, are probably my thing. British touring cars to me, I just think is fab. It's so competitive. Closed racing is brilliant to watch from a fan's point of view. So I would just love to be in the paddock of that and to get on the grid. I've always said my goal is not only just to race in the British touring cars, but to do well in the touring cars. I don't want to run around at the back. That's for sure. So yeah. That's my dream.
And lastly, just to round all of this off, for any women, girls, boys, men, whoever that's listening to this and are maybe looking to find their way into motorsport, what would be your main message or your main advice to give them?
Sure. Well, definitely, absolutely go for it. I think, as we've kind of discussed over the course of this podcast, you can benefit from motorsport so much more than just the racing, how it can affect your life, making so many different friends and building your confidence and all that sort of thing. It's so useful and it teaches you so many good skills in that sense. If you're looking at getting into car racing, as I mentioned earlier, the auto testing, I would definitely recommend that. Auto testing or autographs was kind of what I found at the time. I would highly recommend. The atmosphere in these paddocks is just brilliant. It's the way that motorsport should be. It's fun. It's still got that competitive edge, but everyone is there to have a good time. Everybody's so welcoming. They just love their cars. They love their motorsport, and they just chat away to anyone. So friendly and inclusive. And if you have, anything goes wrong in the car, or you have an issue that you can't fix, you can just walk up to anybody and they'll come over and help you. And I think that's the best way to get involved in the sport, from the sort of grassroots level up. So I would highly recommend just having a quick look on Google, seeing where your nearest autographs or auto testing club is near you, and maybe just going along for a watch and get chatting to some of the folk, and no doubt they'll support you into it.
And from then on, who knows what is possible.
Exactly.
Yeah. And with that, we should draw this feature interview to an end. And thank you so much, Emily, again, for coming on. Really enjoyed that chat, because I think we've covered pretty much every variety of topic we could have covered in that.
Yeah.
But really, really good. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me. Really well spoken, really eloquent, and a lot of great points there as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Great, thank you.
Follow SportSpiel Pod on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram, or go to our website sportspielonline.com. A big thank you to Emily again for coming onto the show. I'll be the first to say that I really enjoyed that particular interview, and there were a lot of really interesting points that came out of it as well. Moving on then, and we have now arrived at part 2 of the show, where it's time to do some news. If you haven't heard this before, it's the portion of the show where myself and Will go back and forth, and we get 2 minutes to talk about an important news story that we feel deserves a mention for various reasons. So, timer at the ready.
I'm just getting the duck ready.
Whenever you're ready. I suppose we should clarify for people that the alert is a duck quack, just in case.
Timer is at the ready.
So, yes, whenever you're ready, away you go with your first story, Will Moulton.
And we're going to stick on the theme of the W Series, which Emily gave her quite strong opinions on, and very valid opinions on in the interview. Since we were last recording, the long list of 55 drivers who are going to be in contention for the first 18 seats has been released. Drivers from a variety of different nations, including an 18-year-old from the United Arab Emirates, which I guess is a step forward. Obviously, Alasdair is miming money over there, but, you know, for a country which is still struggling with women's rights, that's great. 6 Brits in there, including Jamie Chadwick, who we've spoken about before, alongside the likes of Alice Powell, Vicky Pariah, Esme Hawkey, Jess Hawkins, Sarah Moore. Other big names included have been former Red Bull Academy driver and now BMW-backed Bitska Visser, former Renault Academy driver Maria Garcia, American Cher Holbrook, Finland's Emma Kimilainen, and Carmen Yorda, the Spanish driver who has come under much criticism in the last few years. She was a test driver for Lotus and Renault in Formula 1, but has never really done anything in age group categories and has been criticised for previously saying that women cannot compete alongside men in motorsport. So, slightly funny that she has now been
going
selected
to the W Series.
Well, she's in the long list of 55. Criticism, though, as well as the usual criticism about the series, that the selection panel is made up of 3 men, pretty much, in former F1 drivers Alex Wirtz, David Coulthard, and former McLaren sporting director Dave Ryan, who is also series executive. There are a lot of women that could quite easily have been put in a position, such as Pippa Mann, Susie Wolff, Catherine Legg, to help choose, but nope, they decided to go for all men, and it's just not helping the arguments around the series. But as I approach the 5-second mark, the long list has been selected, and we'll know the 18 long list soon.
Impeccable timing.
That was good.
My first news story is funding related. 14 Olympic and Paralympic sports have received a boost in investment from UK sport ahead of Tokyo 2020. The government-backed Aspiration Fund was announced in October. We mentioned it at the time on the show, and it aims to support sports that don't receive full UK sport funding. The sports to benefit this time around include fencing, yes, archery, artistic swimming, badminton, beach volleyball, climbing, goalball, karate, skateboarding, softball, surfing, table tennis, weightlifting and wheelchair rugby. The new sports minister, Mims Davis, said, quote, "The Olympic and Paralympic Games are the pinnacle for athletes across the world. This £3 million fund will give more athletes in more sports the chance to compete at the very top in Tokyo. It will help Great Britain and Northern Ireland continue to be a leading Olympic and Paralympic nation, and I'm sure that athletes will benefit, will inspire the nation and help their sports grow," end quote. Obviously good news for the sports involved, and I'm obviously glad fencing is getting some funding, but perhaps there is a sense of it being a bit late. I look at how British fencing were scrambling for money earlier in the year, or when they had their funding cut in the first place. They also had a crowdfunding campaign which effectively tanked because it raised a total of £170 in its first month, which is not a good amount by any stretch of the margin. And that obviously cast doubts about there being any Team GB representation in the sport at Tokyo at all, and that came from British fencing CEO Georgina Usher, who of course was on this show as a guest at the start of the year. It's obviously a welcome relief that this money is coming fencing's way, and obviously for all the other sports as well, but there is probably a sense that they could have done with it a fair few months before, because we're not actually, in the grand scheme of things, that far away from Tokyo 2020.
Indeed. Well, as you mentioned, it's something we've said before, why you're awarding this halfway through an Olympic cycle, or more than halfway through an Olympic cycle. So, yes. We're going to stick now with another Olympic sport as I go on to my second story, and that Olympic sport is swimming. So, Adam Peaty was the latest in a line of top-class swimmers to come out this week and criticise FINA, the sport's governing body, saying, "It feels like we're still in 1970. So this came after the announcement that a brand new swimming tournament that was planned for release early next year, called the International Swimming League, has been cancelled because, according to FINA, it's respecting athletes' perspective regarding criticisms surrounding the tournament, but the athletes have come out and said, FINA aren't listening to us, they're just doing what they want, they're telling us, how to do things rather than considering what the athletes want. And in a world and in a society where athlete welfare is becoming more important and more recognised, especially in this country with the wake of the scandals with British swimming and British gymnastics and British other British sports as well, with the bullying culture, they really should be taking into consideration what they want. And it just feels like swimming is one of those sports where there's so many events going on that you don't really know where you are in the calendar at any one time. FINA have said they wanted to create, and they still want to create, a series that sort of culminates in the World Aquatics Championships, but it just doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. Every time they plan something, it seems to be cancelled, or if the athletes plan something, it's cancelled. It's just all a little bit of a mess. And swimming, while it might be a great sport to watch, is in a little bit of turmoil, doesn't really know where it's going. Fan numbers are dwindling constantly, and you've got your biggest athletes such as Australian Kate Campbell, Petey himself, Hungarian Katinka Hosszu, all coming out and criticising the sport that they love. It's a worrying time.
It sounds like a relatively archaic structure at the moment, which needs some work to it. Or more than some work, a lot of work.
It's just a bit of a mess, as sort of my ramblings managed to convey.
I think that point came across very well, so thank you. My next story is a boxing match that is sure to be wilder and fraught with fury just as much as its first incarnation.
I hate you.
Yeah. Yes, this is the confirmation that the WBC has sanctioned a, quote, direct rematch between heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder and a certain Tyson Fury. The December 1st bout between the two ended in a controversial draw, with many believing the British fighter should have won on his comeback appearance. There's obviously been a clamour to recognise Tyson Fury's recent efforts of late, and in a sporting sense, it's a great comeback story, and I'm pretty sure everyone is applauding the awareness he's raising over mental health, but let's please not forget, as we've said a few times before, the drug taking and the less than savoury remarks he's made in the past. Homophobic remarks, sexist remarks he's made in the past. Let's not forget, last time he was on the Sports Personality of the Year award, I think there was a petition launched to get his name off it, and if memory serves me right, he was booed when he came out on stage for his interview. I think I'm right in saying.
Can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah.
Yeah, off the top of my head, yeah. So in a sporting sense, we can appreciate what Tyson Fury has done, but let's not forget what's happened in the past, and it looks like we're going to go through this wacky cycle, this build-up to another match between the two of them, and maybe this is just never-ending. Maybe it was just destined to have Wilder Fury rematches over and over again.
You say it's, we can respect what Tyson Fury's done. What exactly has he done? Because he came back and drew, and it wasn't exactly, he could quite easily have lost that fight, and some say he should have lost that fight, and the count was, when he was on the floor in the final round, was a little bit slow. Others will say he dominated the fight and should have won on points. You're entitled to your own opinion, but yes, what he's done in coming back from what he says were very bad times is, fantastic and brilliant, and what he's doing to promote mental health in sport and, mental health awareness and encouraging people is great. But this is also a man who, as you said, has done so many bad things, has never once apologised or taken responsibility for them. And yet everyone's going, because he's promising to donate money to charity and he's doing all this, that he's the best thing since sliced bread, when actually he's not. If he wins Sports Personality of the Year, I will never watch it again.
Big claim. I don't think he will.
There's so many fantastic athletes who, Geraint Thomas, Dina Asher-Smith, Lizzie Arnold, Lewis Hamilton, Harry Kane, who've done more than him this year and deserve to win it more than he does. Exactly.
And boxing stars traditionally don't do well in Sports Personality of the Year. I think, remember Anthony Joshua coming third or fourth, I think, when he was the favourite to win that year. Incidentally, Sports Personality of the Year, if you want to put it in your diaries, it's next Sunday, the 16th of December, with the shortlist for the first time actually being announced on the night. So we don't get a little bit of a preview beforehand. It's all happening there and then. But that is it for the news roundup this time around. Discussion time is coming after this. You're listening to SportSpiel, available on Audio Boom, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Twerking aside, It's been a defining week in the progression of women's football. England will host the European Championships in 2021. Visa signed a 7-year deal with UEFA to become the first sole sponsor of women's football. The Offside Rule podcast and The Guardian collaborated this week to bring us a countdown of the 100 best female footballers in the world. And of course, we had the awarding of the very first women's Ballon d'Or, which went and brought everyone back down to earth thanks to a French DJ. Nice. We will start then with the Ballon d'Or first, which was won by Norwegian and Lyon forward Ada Hegerberg. And we'll briefly touch on DJ Martin Solveig because I think enough has been said on him from various people in the press and on radio stations across the land. For anyone who amazingly didn't see what happened, Solveig was on hosting duties at the awards event, and when Ada Hegerberg was announced as the winner, he asked if she could twerk, to which she promptly answered no. A nice example of misogyny still being present. Andy Murray's remarks on Instagram were a particular highlight of mine for calling it out as it was. Likewise, Marina Hyde's article on The Guardian, which retweeted as well. Urge anyone to give that a read. But does that moment detract from what the moment should be, i.e. Ada Hegerberg winning the first ever Ballon d'Or?
In an ideal world, it wouldn't, but in the world we live in, obviously it has. And I guess being guys, it's difficult for us to comment because we haven't experienced sexism ever, and it's such a complex issue. But at the same time, while we should be talking about what that the stupid views that the man held, I'm not saying his name, we should also be looking at this as a huge step forward for women's football, and one that's taken far too long to come, and also as a recognition of an incredible talent. What Hegerberg has achieved at 23 years old is astounding, really, and we should be applauding her for not just what she does on the pitch, but her classy response off the pitch as well, because every time she's been asked about this question that was put her way, so I had to try and word that correctly there. Every time she's been asked about this question, she's tried to deflect the issue back onto what she sees as the more important things about, growing women's football, the fact that the award has been introduced. And she's been really, really classy in her response. Obviously, her speech as well, telling young girls to believe in themselves and that together, people will make a difference. Really, really classy. And that is what we ideally should be focusing on. But, of course, with what was said, you can't help but focus on that because it was just so out of place, so wrong and so backward.
Very, very backward. One final message on that. If you're going to get someone to host an event, hire a host.
God's sake, please do.
Not a DJ.
Or someone who's in some way directly connected with the game.
Exactly.
If you'd have got Zinedine Zidane doing it, or if you'd have got Rachel Brown-Finnis doing it, that would have been absolutely fine. But a DJ that, a lot of people haven't heard of, and that's got no connection, no outward obvious connection with football, what's the point, really?
Thank you. But yeah, onto the Ballon d'Or itself, and Hegerberg is now in history books as the first ever winner of that. Like you said, about time we actually had a female Ballon d'Or. You touched on her amazing career. To put it all into perspective, 1 Norwegian Cup, 4 French League titles, 3 French Cups, 3 Champions League titles, the 2016 Best Player in Europe award, the 2016 Norwegian Sportsperson of the Year, 2016 FIFA Pro World 11 member, 2017 BBC Women's Footballer of the Year, 237 professional goals in 233 appearances, and like you said, she is 23.
And into that third place in the FIFA Best Women's Player of the Year as well this year, behind Marta, who is, one of the best all-time players. What she's achieved is incredible. And you mentioned there about the goals. I did a little bit of stats around it, and when you think of goal scorers, you immediately think of Pele, Messi, and Ronaldo. Her goals per game ratio is 1.02. That's better than all 3 of those. Pele's was 0.93 from professional games only. Messi 0.84, again just professional club games, and Ronaldo 0.75. So a lot of people say, what Lyon do in the French league is they've won the league 12 years in a row. It's incredible what they do. But you could also just turn around and say, well, La Liga, it's been shit. 13 of the last 14 titles have been between 2 teams, so it's not just, her that's dominating her league, and also she does it in Europe as well. This year she scored 15 goals in 9 games, was the top scorer in Europe in Champions League competitions, male or female. And the best bit was she tweeted Ronaldo to tell him. Obviously I think he holds the overall record with 17, which he achieved a few years back, but to score 15 goals in 9 games against Europe's best.
No other way of putting it, that's a lot. Like you say, twerk remarks aside, it overshadows her as quite an interesting person and an interesting athlete. Like you said, she called out Ronaldo on Twitter saying, oh, by the way, here's my goal tally compared to yours. But she's actually quite an outspoken person, because she's not playing for Norway or the Norwegian national team at the moment. And that's mainly because she's disenfranchised with the stifled nature of the team, and she announced her indefinite international hiatus, if you want to put it that way, after the 2017 Euros, which were not a good turnout for the Norway team, let's put it that way. And so much left to come from her in her career as well, considering she is such a young age. But she is a person who uses her platform to promote the sport she loves. Look, there's an interview in The Guardian with her today, as we record Saturday, where she's doing exactly what you said. She's being asked about what happened at the awards night, but she's turning it back around and saying that night was a defining moment in promoting women's football, which it was. And that's maybe the angle we should be taking.
100%. And what you said there, she stepped away from the Norwegian team. And when you think about Norway as a country, it's quite often seen as one of the most gender equal in the world, not just in sport, but in society in general. And actually in 2017, they announced that the women are going to get equal pay to the men. And you think, traditionally, you would think, well, surely that's a fantastic move. But for her, that's not enough, because the levels of professionalism still differ. The way the women are treated still differ, and it's not what she believes is right. So she's actually, showing the world that it's not just about money. It's about how teams are treated and how sport is run. And she has made the sacrifice of playing for her country, representing her country on the biggest stage of the World Cup this year, because it's highly unlikely, with the way talks have apparently been going, that she's going to be coming back anytime soon. She's sacrificing that in order to improve conditions for future generations of Norwegian footballers. And while it, some people might say, oh, but why would you sacrifice that? And some people might say it's, and you can never win that fight or something. I think she should be massively applauded for what she's doing, making that sacrifice in order to grow the game. And like you said, all she's doing regarding Monday night is turning the argument on its head, saying, let's not talk about going backwards, let's talk about going forwards, and the fact that we've now got this award that we've been calling on for so long. You've got Visa now coming in as a major sponsor of football as well. This is a step forward, and she's focusing on that, and again, she should be applauded for that.
Exactly. Long may that continue, and I'll never criticise an athlete for actually speaking their mind. It's actually quite refreshing.
Unless it's homophobic or sexist or misogynist.
Tyson Fury. So I suppose the big question then is she the best player in the world? Because that brings us on to the 100 best female players in the world countdown that we had this week. First off, big congratulations to the Offside Rule podcast, The Guardian, and especially to Rich Laverty for pulling it all off in the first place. It's a huge achievement, and I know a lot of hard work went into that. So here are the top 5 in that 100 countdown. Number 5 is Eugénie Le Sommer of France and Lyon. Number 4 is Lucy Bronze of England and Lyon. Number 3 is Ada Hegerberg of Norway and Lyon, noticing a bit of a trend with the clubs here. In runner-up, it's Sam Kerr of Australia and Perth Glory, and numero uno, or number 1, is Pernille Harder of Denmark and Wolfsburg. She was the top scorer in the Bundesliga last season as Wolfsburg went and won the title, and they were also the runners-up in the Champions League this year to Lyon. Not really a surprise.
And if you think about it, that also doesn't include Lieke Martens, the Dutch striker who was 2017 FIFA Best Player of the Year.
Who was 9th, I believe, this time around.
And Marta, who is 6-time World Best Player of the Year. That is, I think, a really strong indictment of where women's football is at the moment. The fact that these superb players and Hegerberg still aren't seen as the best players in the world in this list. And I think that shows just how exciting the game is, because a lot of those players you mentioned there are either in the peak of their careers, like right in the middle, or they're still burgeoning. They're still fledgling, really. They're still very young. So I think genuinely I'm really excited, especially now with women's football, with the World Cup coming up next year, then the Euros coming to us in 2021. This is a really, really good time. I know a lot of people have said that there's still disparity in terms of club levels between certain teams, but I think that gap is only going to get smaller, and I reckon in 10-15 years time it's going to be in a really good place. Women's football, it's really exciting, and yeah, like I said, credit for putting this top 100 list together. I'm slightly disappointed that they didn't get the traction they deserved on social media. I didn't see as much of it as I wanted to, but I mean, the fact that they've done this, put that list together and really put it out there and shown where women's football is at, is highly commendable.
Yeah. On the social media point, I will credit the Offside Rule podcast, who I obviously write for in my spare time, because they tweeted relentlessly.
They did a fantastic job. It's just a shame that it didn't quite pick up, which, considering as much as I hoped.
It's a not-for-profit podcast. We all contribute stuff to that website voluntarily. All the editors do that work voluntarily as well. Huge effort from everyone involved on that podcast and on that website to actually make that happen. And articles, countdowns like the one we've just seen, they're the ones that arguably really publicise that sport and actually introduce it to a whole new audience, really. I guarantee there'll be some people who hadn't really heard of Pernille Harder, but now if they're genuine football fans, they might actually want to go and see her play and see her in action. Or if there's a game broadcast on TV, if Wolfsburg are on, then you're likely to tune in and watch Wolfsburg. So that's the whole point why we praise articles like this. Before we conclude this discussion section, I will leave the last word to Ada Hegerberg, because she didn't get the last word last time round. So she said in that Guardian interview that I mentioned that she's done today, I was in a position to promote women's football, and that's what I'm passionate about, and that should be the overriding message. Right, that is nearly it for this latest episode of SportSpiel. Some messages before we pop off. As ever, please follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and we're on Instagram. All of our handles are SportSpielPod, so put that into the little search bar and we should appear. You can also get in touch with us. Our email address is sportspielpod@gmail.com. Likewise, you can check us out on our website, which is sportspielonline.com. We are going to be back on the 23rd of December, which is in 2 weeks' time. That will be the final show of 2018.
And a nice Christmas treats for everyone as well.
I hope so. Christmas has come early for people, and we're free. So we're probably going to be the best Christmas gift that anyone else is going to get.
Oh, I thought you meant we're free in terms of we're not working. But you meant we're free as in we don't cost anything.
Exactly. That's why podcasts are good.
One day we're going to monetize out of this podcast.
Day is not arriving anytime soon. That will probably feature a nice review of the year, which we did last year as well. We thought it went down very well. But we also have another interview, and we'll tease away to start with and get people pumped up for the next episode, because our guest then will be 400-metre runner Amy Alcock, who has quite a good story to tell, actually. There's not a lot about her in the public eye at the moment because she's relatively new on the scene, but a really, really good interview, actually, that I conducted earlier this week. With that, it's big thanks to Emily, again, for coming onto the show. Another great interview that we can add to our catalogue of guests. With that, have you got anything to look forward to this upcoming week before we next record?
A couple of job interviews for me. But also our men continue their World Cup action on Monday at 11:15 against New Zealand, BT Sport 1. If you're not working, or even if you are working, check it out. It's going to be a pretty good game, that one. If we win, we play Argentina on Wednesday, which is going to be another enthralling game. So it's been a brilliant tournament so far. Lots of goals, lots of shocks. I'm loving it, apart from the fact that England slightly struggled to get out of the group. But we're fine now. We're through to the next round. It's all good.
Yeah. If you have some spare time, check out that hockey.
Check it out. It's just bloody good.
That's as good an endorsement as we can get. No sport for me this week, but I do have the Essex Live infamous Christmas party on Friday.
Is that why we're not recording next weekend?
It could be why. There might be a reason. So if you're in the Chelmsford area, watch out, because the Essex Live team are coming. And with that, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. It is goodbye from me. It is goodbye from Will. And until the next time, we'll see you very soon.